Man, this has been a pretty cool game so far. I think the only thing that can make this better is if there was, like, a random Kirby enemy that hasn't been seen in, like, 30 years. If he just, like, showed up, that would be really... Oh my god. Togizo from Kirby's Adventure! What are you doing here? What's going on, guys? It's Pekachow back at it again, and this time, we're not doing a big Kirby video. I'm doing one right now, actually. I'm carefully dissecting Kirby's Dream Land 3, but, you know, when the subject is such a amazing title, you gotta be pretty delicate. You gotta take your time with the procedure. You don't want to rush things. You gotta make sure it turns out the best it can be. Alright, so, yeah, that's the video, I guess. Wait, what's that sound? Huh? Wait. Gimmick's alive, Gimmick's alive, Gimmick's alive, Gimmick's alive. Oh, you came out of your coma, Yumitaro. I knew you'd do it if you just pushed through, my little green Kirby-looking man. I knew it, I believed in you all the way. With the fairly recent re-release of this NES classic, I suppose there isn't really a better time for me to take a look at it than right now. So, let's take a little breather from the giant Kirby videos, and let's just take a nice moment to appreciate Gimmick, the NES classic you may or may not have played, and that hopefully I can convince you to check out by the end of this video if you haven't already. Gimmick, also known as Mr. Gimmick in Scandinavia. Yes, Japan and Scandinavia were the only two territories this game was released in during its original run for the NES, thanks for asking. Was an NES title that released in 1992 and 1993, depending on the region, and, well, looking at those dates, it's pretty clear that this came out late into the NES's lifespan, and by that point, the SNES had already started to overshadow a lot of the releases for the console. This release window was kind of a double-edged sword in a lot of ways. It led to a lot of people not really playing it and skipping out on it because of the SNES and not even knowing of its existence, coupled with the fact that distributors just weren't interested in publishing the game and releasing it in their respective territories, except for Scandinavia. I guess they just really like this dude. Understandably so, Yumitaro's a cool guy. But on the other hand, it led to Gimmick being one of the most advanced games on the console. Well, the only one I can think of that pushed the hardware even further to its limits was Kirby's Adventure. As a matter of fact, the game's director Tomomi Sakai really did encourage for the game to be this good and push the hardware this far. There's a reason the sound chip was upgraded to sound even better. There's a reason why the game's visuals look so good. There's a reason why the game's main mechanic is basically built around a physics engine which is super advanced for this console. Sakai's vision was basically to compete with the SNES, we have to make an SNES quality, SNES tier game, but make it for the NES. During its original release, Gimmick was well received, although it wasn't really well known by the general public. Most people didn't really know of its existence worldwide, and understandably so, knowing these circumstances. But over time, more people started talking about the game and finding out about it, and eventually it gained the cult following that it has today. And that's kind of where we are today, because Gimmick Special Edition has been recently released for all modern consoles worldwide, so now anyone can play the game officially without spending this kind of money on it. But if you don't mind spending a little extra, there's a cool little collector's edition where you can get a bonus. Oh my god. Yumitaro plush, Yumitaro plush, Yumitaro plush! So now you might be curious, what exactly is my story with Gimmick? Why do I know this game exists? Why do I like it so much? Well, my introduction to it all ties back to Kirby, like most things in my life. More specifically, it all ties back to the Ultimate Kirby Iceberg, the first real video I uploaded to this channel that was like my own big original passion project. You may or may not have seen it. It's a little difficult to go back to now, but I still do recommend that you check it out. It was clearly the first thing I ever worked on, but what matters is the heart and effort I put into it, and besides, you will learn so much ultimate, awesome, cool Kirby knowledge you can't get anywhere else. So definitely do check that out. If you haven't, please, I would really appreciate it. But anyways, one of the Iceberg entries relates to the enemy Togizo, who made his first appearance in Kirby's Adventure, and when that game was eventually remade into Kirby Nightmare in Dreamland, Togizo was strangely nowhere to be found, and he never showed back up in the series again. He was completely replaced, and while I was looking for reasons as to why this might have happened, one of the reasons I found was actually related to Gimmick. As you can clearly see, there are these enemies that look like Togizos. I pointed them out in the little intro skit. And apparently Gimmick was getting a re-release for the PlayStation around this time, if I recall correctly, so maybe to avoid any potential controversy, HAL simply just replaced Togizo with Needless, a different needle enemy, and called it a day. Now, this sounds pretty crazy, especially when you consider that there's a more likely explanation behind this. HAL simply wanted to avoid any confusion with the Mario enemy Spiny, who shares some similar design elements and is known as Togizo in Japan, so they simply just swapped him out while they had the chance. But, I don't know, I kind of like the Gimmick explanation more. It just sounds way more insane, so it's more fun to believe in, if you get what I'm saying. And so, from that point on, Gimmick just kind of stuck in the back of my mind as that one game with the green Kirby-like dude as the main character, and the Togizos in it, and it just kind of stuck there until I was just kind of reminded of the game's existence, and I was like, hey, maybe I should check this game out. And so, about a month or two back, I did. And so I got my emulator ready because 1, the special edition wasn't out yet, and 2, even if I did have an actual NES to play the game on, these cartridge prices are looking pretty intimidating. I wouldn't be able to buy one of those. Not in my current financial position anyway. And let me tell you, it was absolutely worth it. So let's waste no time and take a look at Gimmick. The moment you boot up the game, the first thing you are greeted with is an opening cutscene, and it does a pretty good job telling the game's story. You see, there's this girl named Mary, it's her birthday, and for her birthday, she gets this new toy, Yumetaro. However, when Mary goes to sleep that night, the other toys are jealous of Yumetaro, I guess. He gets to stay up on the shelf while they're all crammed in the toy box, and so they kidnap Mary and take her to their own little dimension, which Yumetaro then enters after he just thuds on the ground. Apparently he can just open portals to this place. I don't know, it's weird. There's also a little bit of additional context I found that isn't really displayed in the game at all, so I had to directly go search for this. It was probably in a manual or something, but apparently Yumetaro is actually an Oni, not a toy, and he was caught wandering a gift shop and was eventually purchased by Mary's father before the game. Pretty interesting. Maybe that's why he can just open portals or something. The other toys could do it too. Maybe all the toys are Onis. So the story's pretty simple, but for an NES platformer, it works well. Sure, when you think about it, things can get a little confusing. Is it like a dark, fucked up, twisted version of Toy Story where the toys just go rogue and come to life and kidnap their owners to their own little dimension? I don't know, but it's nice and whimsical, and I think it really fits with the tone the game has overall. It feels very whimsical, if you ask me. So let's check the gameplay now, and Yumetaro is quite the slippery little guy, I gotta say. When you take your finger off the D-pad, it's less like he stops moving and more like he starts to stop moving. And don't even get me started on how he goes down slopes. What does he have on his shoes? He goes down those so fast. Despite the slipperiness though, it's pretty easy to work around, as jarring as it is when you first start playing the game. If anything, I like it more than anything else because it's just so fun jumping off of slopes. Yumetaro just goes flying. As for the jump itself, I have no issues there. It's the usual hold down the B button for a higher jump, and yeah, no problems. And then there's Yumetaro's main attack, the star. By holding down the B button, you can charge up a star, and this thing right here is a game changer. The star bounces along the ground and it's Yumetaro's main form of attack, and while it might not be the most reliable attacking method with the way it moves, it does work pretty well for that purpose. But where it really excels is a thing I'm gonna call star jumping, where you can ride on Yumetaro's star, and this is a thing that can happen if you know what you're doing. When I say that playing Gimmick with and without star jumping are two entirely different games, I mean it. This is a real game changer. As long as there's a wall nearby, you can quickly bounce your star against and then proceed to hop on. Who knows what you can really do with this. You can skip over portions of levels, bounce through them with ease, find secrets, reach new heights you never thought you could reach before. It's just an incredible thing to watch, an incredible thing to experience. It's the definition of easy to learn, hard to master. You can really tell an experienced veteran of this game from a brand new player who doesn't really know what they're doing, and it's just such a cool thing. It's the thing that really makes Gimmick an all-time great, besides, you know, all the other things that make it an all-time great, but still, easily my favorite thing about this game right here. It opens the door to so many different possibilities you never even knew were possible. It also adds just so much replayability to Gimmick, just learning more about the game's physics and engine and what you can do with that, how you can use it in your favor. Initially, I went from someone who couldn't even grasp the concept of star bouncing to someone who just loves abusing it to just skip past sections of stages. Even just being able to pull off a little star bounce brings me so much joy. It's just such an amazing thing. I love it so much, man. Gimmick also has a held item feature where you can store up to 3 items. You can see it down here at the bottom of the screen, as well as some other items you'll find out on the field. For one, there's these health potions. Well, 2 types of health potions, actually. There's one that you'll find in stages. Each stage has 2 of these hidden somewhere, and when you get them, it will permanently increase your HP for the rest of that stage. And there's also the health potion that just heals you up. You can use it whenever you want to. There's also some that buff Yumetaro's attack, such as a fireball that moves in a straight line, making it much easier to hit things than with your star, as well as a bomb, which you just throw in a little arc and then it just explodes. Personally, I didn't really get too much out of these, although the bomb does have a cool use we'll discuss later. But they're just nice things to have, and you can use any of these held items by pressing up and B at the same time. So now that we have everything established, I'll just take a quick little look at all the stages in this game. We'll go over them and we'll see what makes them all so great. And yes, I did say quickly. I won't be going into excessive detail here because I've currently got my hands full dissecting a certain other game that came out late into a console's lifespan that unfortunately seems to have a bit more of a mixed reception than this one. So, don't want to be here forever making this. My channel is like on the brink of death. Look at this. Look how long it's been since the last upload. So anyways, stage 1 takes place in this place. I really have no idea what to even describe this as. It just looks like some sort of nondescript area with blue tiles. But either way, it's still a pretty good stage to get you into the game. It introduces a lot of cool little things like some conveyor belts. You can do some good platforming with or without star bouncing. It's all really good, and I think the boss here is a good way to distinguish a more skilled player from an unskilled player, because trust me, I had a bit of a hard time dealing with this guy in my first playthrough, but now he's literally just a piece of cake. Just jump 3 times, shoot 3 stars, and you're good. As for Stage 2, the theming is a lot more clear. Yumitaro boards a pirate ship and defeats the captain at the end, and I think this might be my favorite stage in the game. I'll just go out on a limb and say it is. There's plenty of great stages in this game though, so I can't say 100% for sure, but I think the deciding factor here is this is the only stage in the game that features the wonderful, the man, the myth, the legend, quadruped green-shelled Togizo. Look at him go. Also, this stage has what might be the coolest skip in the entire game. You can basically skip half the level with just a simple trick you won't even think of on your first playthrough. You see this little wall right here? Well, this stage is designed in a unique and interesting way, where the room you board the pirate ship on also has a little platform that's out of reach, well, normally out of reach, where you then fight the boss in the next room over. But if you decide to use a star bounce off this little piece of wall here, check that out. You just skipped half the stage with this one simple trick. Pirate captains hate him. This pirate boss is one of my favorites in the whole game. It's the first boss that really feels like an actual duel. You need to work around his sword because it blocks your stars, so you need to find other ways to reach him. And when you defeat him, the sword goes flying up in the air and it can actually hit you, so you better be prepared for that. Your life counter better be ready. And just one last thing to add. Very few NES games just have a little area where they're just entirely designed for you to take in the scenery and the music and everything else. But Stage 2 of Gimmick has that. There's literally just a side area where you can just stay by the cliffside, watch the birds go by, and listen to the absolute banger in the background. I suppose I'll talk about the presentation now. There's really no better time to talk about it when the stage is promoting it so hard. There's not really much for me to say about the graphics, but they do look really nice, and there is a decent amount of detail in the background for an NES game. It all just looks really good. It's a game you can go back to and not really see any real issues with the presentation. The music, though, the music is so good. It is just beyond good. It is some of the best on the NES. It's pretty clear Stage 2 is my favorite track. I don't think it's really much of a secret considering what I just said like 30 seconds ago. But still, the game is full of bangers. Other ones like Stage 5, Stage 6, and the first boss theme all come to mind. Very good tracks there. This game just wanted to let you know that they're making use of a more powerful sound chip. They proved it with this soundtrack. They are killing it out here. Now we get to Stage 3, the forest stage, and I think this is one of the weaker ones in the game, although it is still very good. There's one cool bit of level design where you need to jump across these platforms to get across this waterfall, and eventually you cross the waterfall from the top using the same logs you were dodging in the previous section, so I think that's pretty cool. This stage also houses what I consider to be the single hardest room in the entire game. This right here with the slopes and the dropping rocks. It is the only time in the entire game it feels like Yumetaro's physics and whatever the hell he's got on his shoes is actively trying to screw you over. Bless this big gray dude with the weed out here you see before you drop down to this section. I love this guy so much. You defeat him and he gives you a health potion that not only gives you an extra hit point, but also just completely restores your health. Thank you so much, man. Now I can just run through here like it's nothing. The stage completely shifts itself during the last room, though. You go into this dark woods type area, and it's a lot more dark and foreboding than a lot of the rest of the game. Really the only area I could say that for, actually. It does have one of my favorite star skips in the game, and I do think the design is pretty cool here. It's a lot more platforming focused than most of the game, which is nice. Stage 4 is like a desert ruins type area, and it introduces plenty of cool new enemies into the mix. There's these guys, which are basically like the normal enemies you see dotted around everywhere else, except now they have knives that block your shots, so you need to approach them differently than you do with their normal counterparts. And these archers, which you also need to approach differently, because they fire immediately as soon as you enter their line of sight, so you need to play more cautiously when trying to hit them. There's also some cool little tricks and traps here, like this section that just has a bunch of needles, even some that come from behind, and this part where you have to do some platforming around fire that comes from these stone tiki platforms. This stage is also home to the most formidable boss of them all, the newborn chick. And no, I am not joking, I'm being dead serious. The egg shots he fires go all over the place, they're so hard to dodge, it feels like he's just constantly jumping out of the way of your attacks. He even has more health than all the previous bosses. It's ridiculous. This guy is insane. Thankfully, his days of evil are cut short when we defeat him while he is a newborn chick. If we let this guy grow up, who knows what kinds of atrocities he would commit. He was born a killer. Stage 5 is like a factory stage, and it focuses heavily on two main gimmicks.
He said it! He said it!
The first half of the stage focuses heavily on these minecart, unicycle, platform things, and they do some cool things with them, like this little getaway part, even though you can just easily cheese that if you so desire, and this little part where you need to jump off of your cart as it's going into a hole, and the second part focuses heavily on these conveyor belts. They do a lot of cool things with them, and it's some of the most tense platforming in the whole game. It's really good. This stage also features the first boss fight that really feels like it has two distinct phases to it. The first one has you going up against this guy in this little laser machine up here. You need to use this sloping conveyor belt thing in order to get some momentum and height, and then hit him with a star while he's up in the air. The second phase of the fight is even cooler. There's like this spider mech thing that just kind of walks up. It sends out these shots in like a spread type formation, and then there's some lasers that home in on you. It can get pretty hectic, but it's a really good fight. It is pretty enjoyable, and don't rely too much on that slope conveyor belt thing, because the more you stay on it, the closer the spider mecha gets. And finally, stage 6 starts you out in this little snowy area with this wonderful dog enemy. I love this guy so much. You just throw a star and he just runs toward it. It's such a fun enemy type. Too bad he only shows up this one time. Anyways, you enter this tower, fight these two statue guys, complete with a total shift in music that gets you pumped to just scale this tower. And from there, it's a lot of cool platforming across gears and some springs, along with fighting past enemies like this archer guy. The stage caps off with 3 consecutive boss fights against these robed mage guys. They stick to the top of the screen, and the first one sends out bubbles that prevent you from attacking with your stars for a little bit as he swoops down to try to get you. The second one uses this ice spell that drops down some icicles that hit you, and the third one mixes both of them while also being bigger and serves as a great final boss. Is what I'd say if he actually was the final boss. Still a banger fight, though. Yeah, the one thing I left out of this explanation of the stages was the magic items. There are these 6 secret items. You find one in each stage, and each one is hidden and requires some good platforming and usage of star bouncing, or just a keen eye to get. As for the bad ending, just to quickly cover that, though, Yumetaro just beats the mage guy and heads back home. No Mary or anything, he just goes back. Imagine how mortifying it must be for the parents to wake up that morning and see their daughter missing and her toy box empty. The worst thing about this, though, probably has to be that the parents won't even get proper closure as to where she went. Do you think the police are gonna suspect the toys as the kidnapper? Yeah, this bad ending really does its job well. You want an ending that makes a little more sense and ends a little better for the parents. They did nothing wrong here. Alright, so I want to be a little brief with the magic items. I don't want to go in depth on all of them. I want to leave a few things open to anyone who hasn't played Gimmick. I know, says the guy who's making a video about the game and talking about everything the game has to offer. So, assuming this video does its job to get people to play Gimmick, and this video not going over all the magic items gets people to also play Gimmick, then the game sells 1 gimillion copies. You know who to thank for that. It's me, by the way. Some of my personal favorites include the one in Stage 2 where you need to push down this can and then carefully time your jump on a cannonball to reach the magic item. The one in Stage 3 that actually requires a bomb to blow up this antlion and then you go into the den and find the magic item inside. And then there's the one in Stage 4 that requires not 1 but 2 really good star jumps in order to reach it. The path is also not exactly the most hidden thing in the world too, and it's what introduced me to how much depth Gimmick has, how many layers there is to this gameplay, and all the crazy things you can do with star jumping, because obviously I just saw this while going through the game and decided to go for it. It really did change my perspective on the game quite a bit with all these subsequent playthroughs and such. So if you then beat the game without using a single continue and collecting all 6 magic items, then you unlock the special final stage. A castle descends down from the sky on the map, and you can head inside there, and the stage is pretty plain, all things considered. The atmosphere is super nice and serene, and you can just really take that all in, especially considering the level design is like a straight line with the occasional jump. And also there's this cool little star jump you can do for a potion, but that's really all the level design here has going for it. I'd compare it to Sonic Forces, but like, come on now, these 2 games are in entirely different leagues. I'm not gonna do that. That's just not even fair. And speaking of the final showdown, it's pretty cool. The first phase has you going up against this dude in a cloak. You try to hit him on the head while dodging the pillar attacks he sends out, and after a few hits, he reveals his true form. Creepy guy with a lightsaber! In order to beat him, you need to work around his lightsaber. He also uses it to whack you, but also acts as kind of like a shield to protect himself from your shots. You really need to understand how the stars work and their physics in order to actually land some hits on him, and it's a good final boss considering that in order to do this, you really needed to have an idea for how stars worked in order to get all the magic items. Except this time, rather than using them in a more platforming sense, it's more about combat and dueling with this guy. Anyways, Yumetaro triumphs over the dude with the lightsaber. He finds a door in the castle that just so happens to contain Mary, and as the island's crumbling down, the two make an escape back to Mary's room, and they just kind of look out the window, and the credits roll. She's trying to process the fact that her toys just kidnapped and tried to kill her. And that's Gimmick, the greatest NES game you may or may not have played. And if you just so happen to fall into the latter camp, hopefully this video can convince you to check it out, even if I just went over most of what the game has to offer. Really, it's more fun when you experience than just hear it from someone else. While many NES games have definitely shown their age with time, and understandably so, they're like 30-year-old games, and this was a fairly primitive time period for gaming, Gimmick is one of those rare NES platformers that feels like it almost hasn't really aged a day, or at least hasn't aged as much as others on the system. It's up there with the likes of Kirby's Adventure, Super Mario Bros. 2 and 3, and basically the entire Mega Man hexology as a timeless classic platformer that you can revisit basically whenever and have a blast with it. The game just has a unique charm to it, and while I went into it expecting something a little more Kirby-like in terms of the gameplay, I mean, look at this guy. Tell me it wouldn't be Kirby-like. Just look at him. The game even has Togizo in it, for crying out loud. I went in getting a much different experience compared to Kirby games, but something just as great. Well, I mean, Yumetaro throws stars like how Kirby spits them, if that really counts for anything. Sure, the game does have some issues, like some gimmicks being used only like once and not really expanded upon much after that and being just completely discarded, along with a few pieces of level design that are just, okay, no one's gonna see this coming on their first playthrough, come on now. I can still recommend the game wholeheartedly, and if you want a good NES platformer with a super high skill ceiling, Gimmick is the one for you. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike, and if you want more content like this, be sure to subscribe. Also, I got a Twitter, the link is in the description. So, if you'll excuse me, I've got a certain meticulous dissecting of a certain other slept-on classic game to attend to now. So, go play Gimmick. Pekachow out!